Hi, my name is Sarah Nazarian. I'm here to talk to you today about the college application essay that students write for their applications going into senior year. Mostly I'll be sharing with you a PowerPoint that should explain pretty much everything. So here we go. Okay. So again, my name is Sarah Nazarian. I'm an English teacher at Menin High School. And I've been working with primarily juniors and seniors my entire career. So this essay is very familiar to me. So why should you trust me? Okay, well, this is my 28th year teaching and my 20th year teaching this class in the summer as well. So I've spent countless hours working with countless students on this particular piece. Also, every year I go out of my way to contact several local admissions offices. Cornell, Geneseo, Nazareth, the University of Rochester, and Hobart William Smith, who are, a lot of the local schools that our kids apply to at various sorted educational levels, just to make sure I'm giving them the proper advice. And up to par with what their expectations are. And the picture that you see on the screen right now are my sons and stepsons, the youngest of which is a senior this year and just going through the process. So I have gone through the college application process with my students, yes, but also with these four geniuses in my own home, two of which went through the sports recruiting process, the other two did not. So we've had some various experience at home. So I feel like I'm pretty comfortable with going through this process with your kids as well. Okay, so the bulk of this presentation is going to look at the Common App itself, the personal statement / essay questions that come along with the Common App, which is what most of our students actually use, conversations with admissions offices and what they want to see, the typical types of essays that students do write, two things kids can control, and at the end I will tell you about a course I teach in the summer where I work directly with kids on writing their essay. So what is the essay's format? This is a really big concern for people, and when I graduated high school in 1989, the expectations were very different. There wasn't a word limit. We could write we were supposed to and expected to write much more formal essays. That game has changed. So this is a much more informal, personal piece, conversational, if you will, kind of writing. It has a 650 word maximum. Colleges are inundated with applications that they need to review. And so they were finding that kids were writing way too much for them to really have a chance to digest. So about 6 or 7 years ago, they went to this format where it's 650 words maximum, which is basically 1 page single spaced. And if you think about that, it's good news for some kids, a little scary for others. The kids who tend to want to write everything they can think of get a little daunted by that limit. For other kids, they're super comfortable staying at that sort of 1 page space. So there are ways to approach this to make sure that every student is comfortable. Okay, so I'm going to pull up the Common App here and show you that the Common App itself allows all kinds of really cool explorations. So I went to Gettysburg College. You can pull up a specific college, read about it, look at what their statistics are, which students they accept, etc. Or you can look at planning. The application is right there. So students would go on to the Common App, and most of our students use the Common App for their entire application process. So what it is a consortium of close to 1,000 schools that have all agreed to accept this application the same way they would accept one that they made up on their own. And so a student goes in, makes an account. That account can be made at any time. So you don't have to wait until a certain date. The 21-22 application for the Common App will show up August 1st, but anything that a student has created leading into that up before August 1st will immediately roll over. So they can put in demographic information, activities and honors, all of those things that would go on the application is done in one online little database. Then when a student goes on to send applications, all they have to do is click on the various schools, and that one application gets sent out to all of their schools. So my son, who just applied to college this year, had 10 different schools he applied to, all of which were on the Common App. So he had to fill out one application, do one personal statement, and then it's sent from there. If there are supplemental essays or other expectations that schools have, the Common App will alert you to those once you say that you want to apply to that particular school. So it's very user-friendly. It's really comprehensive. It's made the application process much more streamlined for kids. And on there, you'll find the Common App questions, which I'll get to in a second. And so really what we're looking at in this essay is putting some sort of personality with the paperwork that's already in the Common App. So the Common App would have the courses you've taken, the activities you've taken part in, so sports, music, work, all of those things, who your parents are, where your siblings go to college, all those things that would be in there, educational honors and awards, as well as MVP for the swim team or something along those lines. All of that is on the Common App in terms of the actual application. Then comes the essay. So the essay is an opportunity to assign personality to all of that paperwork. Okay, so after you've shared everything on the Common App, what don't they know about you? And that's where your essay comes in. So here are the Common App prompts for the graduating class of 22. They are the same as the last couple of years with one exception. The one you see on the screen right now that's number 4 is a new question that replaced one about problem solving. And I won't read these to you word for word. You can look them up online. You can follow the Common App on Twitter if you're really feeling cool and up to date. I do. But what you'll see is that the vast majority of these are relatively vaguely worded, and that's by design, so that a student can insert his own personality, her own style into whatever the response would be. So the first one is about any kind of background, identity, or interest or talent that your application would be lacking if it wasn't included. So that's, again, a pretty vague prompt. The second one is lessons from obstacles. A lot of people worry about this, but I'll address that in a little bit. The third is reflecting on a time when you challenged or questioned a belief or idea. Those are often really formative, kind of interesting essays. Again, this fourth one is the new one, reflecting on something that someone has done for you and has made you happy or thankful in a surprising way. This one was added this year as sort of a response to seeing the goodness from everything that's come from social unrest, quarantine, the pandemic, you know, what our students have been living through for the last year. And then there are 3 further questions. One is to discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked personal growth. Again, often really interesting for kids. A topic, idea, or concept that they find so engaging that it makes them lose track of time. That's one of my favorites. But the really important thing to see is that number 7 is topic of your choice, which essentially means that the other prompts are there in case a student needs an inspirational point from which to begin. But really what the colleges want to see is something about a student that gives them insight into what kind of person they are, not just a list of statistical information. So if you look at the fact that topic of your choice is an option, that often helps kids sort of settle down a little bit and think about representing themselves in whichever way feels comfortable to them. Okay, so there's this book that was published several years ago that I really still like a lot in terms of its content, and it seems relatively still up to date in concept. 2 Yale grads met with admissions counselors all over the country, and when they say, you know, that on the screen right now is the cover of the book, 50 top colleges, whatever, it's a lot of the schools that our Pittsburgh kids tend to apply to. And they asked these counselors a couple of things. First, they asked them for samples of essays. Now, some of the samples in here are either too long or too short based on the standards that the Common App now holds, but they're still valuable if you pick this book up. I think it's a grand total of $6.99 on Amazon. When I teach my summer class, I give students model essays of recent essays that fall into the parameters that they would need to follow for theirs. But the 2 big questions that they asked, apart from can we see some samples, are what's your advice to applicants about their essays, and what do counselors in the admissions offices want to see? And the results show up here. And what I've done is taken a few of those results and condensed them a little bit so that you get the basic overarching idea of what they say. And again, I won't necessarily read these to you. You can see them on the screen. But one thing to keep in mind is that you are having very human, real people read these essays. These aren't, you know, robotic, serious people. They'll laugh at a joke. They'll get excited about something that feels exciting to the reader or to the writer. So an essay isn't necessarily there to entertain, but to appeal to sort of the human nature of the admissions reader. This next one is also really important because we have students all the time say things to us like, well, I'm not a great writer, so I'm really concerned about this, or they want to process it so much and have somebody over edit it so that it doesn't even sound like a kid anymore. But it says that a lot of the admissions people were very concerned that students know some are well written, some are awkward, but the more real it is, the better. It should sound like you. Okay, further, students should write on a subject that really means something to them. So often kids say, well, my mom thinks I should write about this, and my aunt's an English teacher, she told me I should write about this. And that's where I have to stop and say to kids, you really need to write about something you care about, because it translates very differently to the reader if there's genuine enthusiasm behind the writer's intent. So they should write about something that's really sincerely important to them, not something that sounds like a resume building experience. I urge students to write as they would in a journal or to a friend. And like I said before, this is informal, relatively conversational writing. Also, many students over proofread and process out any kind of personality. The idea of just relaxing and writing how you would, again, speaking with a friend or a family member, I often say to kids, pretend we're sitting across from each other having coffee and you were explaining whatever you want to write about in your essay. That's the mode through which you should look at this writing process. The admissions officer wants to see the real you. What makes you tick? How are you different from your friends? You know, and it's okay to talk about quirky things or little aspects of your personality. I hear from kids all the time, well, I haven't done anything, you know, I'm only 17. Well, you've done 1,000 things. It's just some of them might be little. So, you know, and I like this phrase here, where you don't have to vacation in Asia or ski in the Olympics to have an interesting perspective. Every kid has unique ideas. And so we try to find those and make sure that that's something that we highlight. Your grades, your scores, your activities are history. There's nothing you can do about them when you sit down to fill in your application blanks. The essay is an opportunity to enhance that with who the kid really is. And then finally, when they were asked what really works best, there's the list. Students should feel comfortable trusting their instincts. If the essay feels good to the writer, it will feel good to the reader as well. And again, those quotes are all from that book in the earlier slide. So the types of essays we see most fall into these general categories. And the way it works is I like to present students with these categories, give them ideas about what they might want to write about, and then see which one of the prompts on the Common App seems to address their particular essay the best. And if none of them really do, we go with topic of your choice. But sometimes this list helps kids come up with different ideas. Relationships, not just like boyfriend, girlfriend stuff. In fact, I strongly recommend against writing those, but close friendships, family relationships, twin essays are always fun. You know, a grandparent that's been very close to someone. The thing that's most important with the relationship essay is that it be mostly about the writer and not entirely focused on the other person. Travel essays are really interesting too. It gives kids an opportunity to talk about not just where they went, but what they saw and what they learned while they were there. And a lot of those need to be like a small moment of a vacation or a mission trip or whatever type of travel they chose to be on, and spread it out to a larger description. So you can't talk about an entire 2-week travel experience, but rather I say to kids, what's the one moment that when you think about that trip, it really sticks out to you? And that's the moment that you write about. Obstacles, I addressed this before where we talked about things that could have been problems or difficulties for students. It makes parents often quite nervous to think about a child writing about something that went wrong or something that was difficult. But at the same time, in working with students, so many of them say that these were really formative experiences, that growth, maturity, perspective, a lot of those things stemmed from things going wrong, getting cut from the team you were sure you were going to make, losing someone that was really important to you, either the ending of a friendship or a tragic loss, things that the kids have gone through that seem really dark and negative to write about, but a lot of what they say turns out to be points of growth for them, stem from those sort of obstacle moments. So I work with kids to make sure that it's handled with grace and poise. And to be honest, they're usually really good at monitoring that themselves. Thought essays should really be called belief essays, things that students really stand up for. And we've seen some really interesting activism pieces or opinion pieces or political pieces. And it doesn't matter where a student sits in their opinions or thoughts or beliefs, as long as it sounds genuine and sincere. So I was sort of raised that you don't talk about politics or religion because it's not polite, whatever. But this generation's much better at doing that, thankfully. And if they defend or explain something that's very meaningful to them, it's often incredibly powerful in learning about that student. So thoughts, beliefs, it can be any topic. It might be why the Buffalo Bills are definitely going to win the Super Bowl next year, which is what my son would argue every year. So it doesn't have to be serious, heavy things, but anything that that student really does believe in the core of their soul. Offbeat essays are exactly what they sound like, different kind of pieces. A student can write a poem, a student can write a stream of consciousness piece, a student can write a dialogue between themselves and their best friend to show their relationship. If the thought of an offbeat essay makes a student absolutely breathless with anxiety, then it's not for them. I mean, I tell kids all the time, if the words offbeat give you hives, steer clear, do something else. And again, the topic a student writes about has to feel comfortable for them as well. Self-description are basically kind of quirk essays, what makes you a little goofy or a little weird or a little bit different than, say, your peers or your family or, you know, whatever. Unique points of view, fun little thought processes that students have in their own heads, little games they play with themselves, whatever. These are the really sort of unique kind of deep down philosophical thoughts that kids have. And sometimes these are really interesting as well. Home essays, these tend to fall into a whole bunch of different categories, but not necessarily where home is referring to one's hometown, but I had one student last year write about how her bed is sort of her home away from everything. So when she's happy, she goes and sort of sits on her bed and writes on her journal and thinks about it. When she's upset, that's sort of her safe haven. And I've had kids write about their deck as a place where they just go sit and think, or a particular chair, or it's a grandparents' lake house where the whole family gets together and has, you know, some sort of relaxing family time, or some other unique aspect of what's home for that student. I had a student whose family had been in the military system for years and years. And by the time he came to Mendon, he had lived in 16 different homes. So he talked about how home for him had nothing to do with a town or even a hemisphere, but more about being with your family. So again, there are a ton of different ways to approach a home essay. Activity essays are really helpful sometimes for enhancing an activity either that doesn't really get highlighted on your Common App, or is a big part of your life and you want to go on to explain why. So for example, often we have students who participate in scouting, and that just shows up as one line item on their application. But really, that takes an enormous amount of that student's time and energy and activity free time. So I like for kids to sort of dig into that a little deeper in their essays and talk about specific aspects of scouting or a particular scouting experience that was meaningful or important to them. Also, if you have a student who participates in orchestra, wind ensemble, and music is their life, and when you look at the Common App, there's all these musical activities and honors and awards and all these things, it's really nice to see a sort of personal side of all of that experience. So for maybe a student to talk about one particular experience, one performance that was particularly important or meaningful, or maybe a NISMA competition that went as planned, or maybe sometimes it didn't, but it's okay to write about those activities that show up on the Common App, as long as you do so in a much more personal way. And then finally, realization essays are these sort of aha moments, and frequently junior year kids have a lot of those. They thought they really wanted to be a doctor, and then it turns out the more they've taken advanced sciences, they're like, I don't really like this that much. Or an internship that they didn't think they were going to be that excited about that turned out to be really eye-opening, and now they want to go into politics and go to school in Washington, D.C. and become part of the government system. So those sort of really interesting moments. It can also be personal aha moments. We've had kids talk about epiphanies that they've had in terms of their friend groups, or realizing things about themselves or their view of the world that they hadn't really captured before. So these obviously it's a pretty wide variety of topics, but these are what we tend to see the most. Okay, so at this point, at the end of junior year, going into senior year, there are really two things that students can still control going into preparing their application. Because if you think about it, rarely senior year do kids pick up a new instrument or a new sport. It tends to not really happen. So all of the grades, test scores, activities, and especially this year, for the current juniors, and you know, it's just been such a strange year that you're probably not adding in a whole bunch of other things. You may be picking up stuff senior year that you left off with sophomore year, but at this point there are really two things you can control. One is which teachers write your recommendation letters. Most kids need 2 teacher recommendation letters, and it has to be from a teacher. But that can be anybody from your art teacher, your business teacher, your phys ed instructor, to English, math, social studies, science, world languages. It can be anybody that's given a student an evaluative grade in a class. And then the second thing that the student can still control going into the application process is the power and content of your essay. So to look really carefully at what you say, how you present yourself, being very genuine, showing something unique. And one thing I often try to tell kids is, if you're looking as an admissions officer at, say, Geneseo or something, and you have 10 applications on your desk that are all academically qualified to attend Geneseo. Okay, every kid has made it to that desk because their grades, their activities, the body of their work as a student has made them eligible and qualified to attend Geneseo. But that Geneseo admissions officer can only take 6. What is going to get your essay or your application into that 6 rather than the 4 that the admissions officer has to do away with? And Maybe it's the essay. Maybe it's something that the student says that shows a side of them that makes them an interesting candidate or makes them look like they might be a good citizen for Geneseo. The application essay allows a student to give themselves a little leg up. Is it the most important thing? Of course not. You had to get to that table of 10 qualified applicants with the work that you've done throughout high school, be it in or out of the classroom. But the essay itself can be a tipping point if it comes down to separating equals. So I will say, while this isn't an entirely commercial announcement, I do teach a college essay course through the Pittsburgh Rec, and I will be teaching 5 weeks this summer. The dates are here on the screen. It's from 1 to 3 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. The first week is the week that right after we get out of school and the kids graduate, essentially. Then there's a week off for 4th of July. Then I pick up the week after that and go straight through to August 6th. I am sort of front loading it this year because I have to get 3 kids off to college in August also. So I'm trying to make sure I take care of the business stuff up front and then handle the stuff in my own house after that. People panic sometimes because they don't see the course in the spring catalog. It comes out in the summer catalog, which is late May. And I tend to accept up to 30 students per class. So there's ample opportunity to get into a class. And again, it's Monday through Friday, 1 to 3, beginning of the week, a student has to have 0 prepared. And by the end of the week, they will have their essay done. I promise. So I've been doing, again, this is going into the 20th summer that I've been working with students on this, and I've got it down to a science. The one thing we're waiting for right now is guidance to determine whether the course will be in person at the rec or at one of the local schools. We've done it at Mendon High School before in a computer lab. So I don't know if we're going to be in person or virtual. Last summer I did it virtually, and while I think we all agree everybody would like to be in person, I've nailed down the process for doing it virtually as well. So I'm ready to go either way. Okay, and that is my personal email, not my school address, but you could also always, if you can't remember this at a later time, find me through the Mendon High School webpage and contact me for any questions you have. Again, the rec handles all of the registration for my summer class. But if you just have questions about the essay, again, all of the English teachers at Mendon and Sutherland are qualified to sit down with students and work with them, talk about what their topics might be, talk about what their approaches may be. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. So we're all prepared to do this. We're all prepared to talk with kids. We like doing this, to be honest, as a teacher. It's kind of a nice personal experience with kids, especially kids that you maybe taught when they were younger, and then you get to see, you know, them all grown up, getting ready to go to college and stuff. So it's kind of a nice thing for teachers to do. We don't mind it at all. But again, I'm happy to work with kids as well. So hopefully I've made everybody feel a little bit more comfortable about this essay. That's my goal, is to calm people down rather than make people more nervous. And hopefully I will see some of your kids over the summer or in the fall when they come in for questions. Thank you so much.